The fog hung low over Fort Reading, curling around the edges of the naval base like a ghostly tide. The morning air smelled of damp earth and salt from the nearby coast. A chill ran through the training grounds, and the early sunlight fought to penetrate the gray mist. The sound of marching boots echoed off the concrete buildings as teams of SEAL trainees ran drills, their faces taut with focus, muscles straining against exhaustion. Among them a figure approached, calm, unassuming, yet exuding a presence that somehow demanded attention. Commander Carter stepped onto the base with measured strides. Her uniform was crisp, her boots polished to a mirror shine. She carried no visible sign of arrogance, no grand gestures, and yet something in her posture made the men pause unconsciously. His eyes scanned the training grounds with quiet precision. Every drill, every movement of the SEAL trainees was catalogued in her mind. She noticed the way some recruits lagged slightly in their formations, the tiny errors in timing and technique, the subtle lack of cohesion in their unit. Nothing escaped her attention, not even the way the wind caught the edge of a flagpole. Lieutenant Jake, a confident but sometimes reckless officer, noticed her first. He had been in several operations overseas and prided himself on understanding military hierarchy. To him, Carter's appearance was underwhelming. A new officer, mid-level, probably sent for paperwork or evaluations. His smirk widened as he turned to his friends. "Look at her," he whispered, loud enough for nearby colleagues to hear. "Another paperwork officer. Bet she can't even tell a mortar from a magazine." Laughter rippled around the small group, casual and self-assured. Didn't respond. Not a flinch, not even a glance. Her gaze stayed steady, unwavering, as if measuring the man and the men beside him, not judging them, merely observing. Her silence drew attention, though nobody admitted it. The fog seemed thicker where she stood, enveloping her like a veil. Some of the recruits whispered behind her back, curiosity mixing with doubt. Who was she really? Why had the base commander sent someone who seemed so ordinary? The morning drill continued. Soldiers leaped over walls, crawled through mud pits, and sprinted across obstacle courses, their muscles screaming in protest. Walked slowly along the perimeter, her boots leaving crisp impressions on the wet earth. She carried no gear, no weapons, no sign of urgency, yet her presence altered the rhythm of the drills. The men worked harder, unconsciously aware of being observed by someone who saw every detail, every hesitation. Jake, oblivious to the subtle shift in atmosphere, leaned against a wall with his hands crossed, chuckling under his breath. "Paperwork officers always think they can teach us something," he said, loud enough for her to hear, though he didn't expect any acknowledgement. "Let's see if she even knows what a real mission looks like." Stopped walking. For the first time, she let her gaze meet his. It was a simple look, calm and measured, yet loaded with a quiet authority. Jake felt it instantly, a jolt of unease he couldn't quite place. This wasn't the look of someone unfamiliar with military operations. It was the look of someone who had been there, who had seen what he had, and more. He shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that the man who had been joking moments before might have misjudged her entirely. By midday, the rumor mill was quietly spinning. Soldiers and officers whispered among themselves, curious about the new commander who carried herself with such deliberate composure. Some speculated she was a bureaucrat sent to audit the base. Others suggested she had served overseas in intelligence or special operations. Nobody knew for sure. Never volunteered information. She let her presence and observation speak for her. Her silence was unnerving. During lunch in the mess hall, Jake found himself recounting the morning encounter with his friends, laughing at what he assumed was an amusing story. "She didn't even crack a smile," he said. "Can you imagine, paperwork officer standing there like she's some kind of ghost in the mist?" Others chuckled, agreeing. They had no idea. Sat alone, reading a file quietly at a corner table. She made no move to join conversation, no gesture to display interest in their jokes. The men around her noticed her stillness, the intensity in her eyes, and some felt inexplicably uncomfortable. Later, she visited the briefing room. Officers and trainees gathered for a review of upcoming drills. Entered quietly, standing near the back. Her presence was commanding, though understated. The The room buzzed with low chatter until she spoke. A simple observation, one line directed at a planned infiltration exercise. If you take the left corridor without securing comm relays, your team will lose contact within 40 seconds, she said calmly, scanning the maps and reports before the room. Silence fell like a wave. The captain, confident in his planning, raised an eyebrow. "And you're certain?" he asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. Didn't hesitate. "I've mapped that corridor personally. The signal fails exactly at 38 to 40 seconds, depending on environmental conditions. You'll need to reroute to maintain comms." The room froze. Officers exchanged glances. Trainees whispered. Nobody had expected her knowledge, her confidence, or her precision. Even Jake, standing at the back, felt a pang of doubt. She wasn't just a paperwork officer. She was something else entirely, something formidable. As the day wore on, continued her observations, moving quietly through drills and exercises, cataloging performance, strategy, and execution. Her notes were precise, her questions deliberate. Nobody heard her mutter, nobody saw her frown, yet her attention seemed to penetrate the very core of the team's operations. By the time evening fell, the fog had lifted, revealing the vast expanse of the base under the dying sun. Stood at the edge of the training grounds, hands behind her back, watching the soldiers complete their final drills. Jake approached, curiosity overcoming bravado. "Commander, you've been quiet all day. So what's the deal? You just here to watch us fail?" Turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. There was no mockery, no fear, no condescension, only the quiet weight of someone who had seen it all. "I'm here to observe," she said, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "And I've seen enough to know who's ready and who is." Jake swallowed hard, suddenly aware that he had underestimated her. The fog rolled again over Fort Reading, but it no longer seemed ordinary. Carter had arrived, not just as an officer, but as a presence that would challenge every assumption, every joke, and every expectation on the base. Respect had not yet been demanded, but it would soon be earned. And somewhere deep in the base, the men who had laughed earlier began to wonder, who is this woman? Really, the next morning, Fort Reading buzzed with tension and curiosity. His presence had already stirred conversations, whispers drifting from the barracks to the mess hall. Soldiers speculated about her past, unsure whether she was merely a new administrator sent to oversee base operations or something far more significant. Some joked she was a glorified paperwork officer. Others, more cautious, suspected she had a shadowy history in intelligence or special operations. Lieutenant Jake, still nursing his ego from the previous day, walked through the training yard with his team, repeating the morning's joke about her rank. "Paperwork officer," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. His friends laughed, oblivious to the sharp eyes watching them from the sidelines. Carter appeared at the edge of the obstacle course, moving with the silent grace of someone accustomed to attention without demanding it. She didn't carry a clipboard or shout instructions. She simply observed, her piercing gaze tracking every motion of the soldiers in the grueling mud and surf drill. Every leap, every crawl, every stumble was noted in her mind. Her silence was unnerving, like the calm before a storm. Jake's laughter faltered when he noticed how the trainees instinctively straightened when she glanced in their direction. Her presence demanded focus without a word. Her eyes met his briefly, and he felt an unfamiliar sense of scrutiny, sharp, knowing, and impossible to shake. For the first time, he realized that this woman might know more about military operations than anyone present. By mid-morning, rumors had begun to spread like wildfire. Soldiers whispered in small groups, speculating about its past. One claimed she had once led a covert operation in Afghanistan. Another said she had been part of a Navy task force so secret that even the SEAL teams didn't know its members' names. Most dismissed the stories as exaggerations, but the fact that multiple sources hinted at a mysterious, impressive past made even the most skeptical pause. Jake, driven by curiosity and unease, decided to test her knowledge. During a briefing, he interrupted, speaking with his usual bravado. "Commander Carter, what's your experience with live extraction drills? Ever actually led one in the field?" he asked, trying to provoke a reaction. Didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm, precise, and deliberate. "Yes, I have led multiple extraction operations under live combat conditions. Coordination of team movements, maintaining comms, and assessing environmental variables were all part of my responsibility. Casualty rates were minimized due to strategic planning and preemptive risk assessment." The room fell silent. Several SEALs exchanged uneasy glances. Even the captain, who prided himself on knowing the operational history of everyone on base, looked taken aback. Jake felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't someone bluffing. This was someone who had been there. After the briefing, moved among the trainees as they prepared for their next drill, a timed infiltration exercise through a simulated urban combat course. She didn't speak. She didn't touch equipment. She only watched, noting how each team member moved, communicated, and responded to unforeseen obstacles. Every delay, every hesitancy, every misstep was recorded in her mind. Jake, still feeling uneasy, decided to test her once more. "Commander," he said, leaning casually against a wall, "what would you have done differently in our last exercise? Come on, tell us the secret magic trick." His tone was half joking, half challenging. His response was measured. "You allowed predictable patterns in your approach. Your recon failed to anticipate terrain-induced signal interference. If you had accounted for communication drops, your entry would have maintained full operational cohesion. Your timing is inconsistent, and your team coordination could be. I suggest small adjustments to sequencing and contingency protocols. That will improve your performance." A hush fell over the room. Her words were not arrogant. They were factual, precise, and delivered without emotion. For the first time, Jake felt the weight of her experience pressing down. The casual bravado that had carried him through previous operations seemed almost childish under her calm, unflinching assessment. As the drill began, walked among the team silently, observing how the soldiers implemented strategies, coordinated with one another, and adjusted to real-time obstacles. Mud splashed, simulators exploded, and alarms blared, but she moved like a shadow, noting everything without interference. Her attention to detail bordered on the supernatural. Jake struggled during the exercise. He realized he had been overconfident in his planning and underestimated the variables he had ignored. Predictions from the briefing were proving accurate, every single one. One of the recruits stumbled over a tripwire and immediately signaled adjustments with subtle hand movements, directing other teams without shouting. Her quiet authority was mesmerizing. The trainees responded instinctively. By the end of the drill, it was clear. She had anticipated every potential failure and corrected it before disaster struck. Even the captain, who had doubted her arrival, nodded in muted respect. The soldiers, including Jake, were left stunned. That evening, back in the barracks, whispers grew into cautious speculation. Soldiers exchanged stories, trying to piece together who Carter really was. One recounted a rumor of a secret mission in which she had led a team into hostile territory to rescue a captured SEAL commander, a mission that had succeeded without any public acknowledgement. Another hinted that she had once dismantled an entire smuggling operation while embedded undercover, saving dozens of lives. Jake couldn't sleep. He felt compelled to know more. Late at night, he accessed restricted files trying to uncover her operational history. What he found was fragmentary and heavily redacted, classified under Operation Valkyrie. The documents hinted at extraordinary missions, Afghan extractions, hostage rescues, and leadership roles in covert operations that had never made headlines. Each line suggested brilliance, courage, and calculated precision. As he read, Jake realized the truth. The woman he had mocked in the mess hall, the paperwork officer, had been operating at levels he couldn't comprehend. She had led missions that defined SEAL history, missions that the world never knew existed. His ego deflated, replaced by a mix of awe, guilt, and admiration. The next morning returned to the training grounds. She didn't speak about her past. She didn't boast. She simply observed, taking note of small errors in team formations, minor hesitations in responses, and lapses in communication. Her authority was quiet but undeniable. The men, now aware of her legendary capabilities, if only in rumor, watched with a mixture of respect and trepidation. Jake approached her cautiously. "Commander, we were just talking about drills." He trailed off, unsure how to frame his respect without sounding foolish, regarded him with a steady, unreadable gaze. "Actions speak louder than words, Lieutenant. Observing is the first step toward understanding. Speak when necessary, lead when required. Everything else is noise." Her words lingered in the air, like a lesson unspoken but understood. The fog over Fort Reading had lifted slightly that morning, but the sense of mystery surrounding Carter remained thick, impenetrable. One thing was clear: she was no ordinary officer. She had arrived to observe, assess, and perhaps even challenge the very foundation of the base's SEAL program. For the first time, Jake felt a sense of humility, a rare feeling for a confident SEAL officer. He realized he had underestimated her entirely. The woman who had appeared quiet, unassuming, and even a little forgettable was already leaving an indelible mark. Her presence had shifted the dynamic of the entire base, planting seeds of respect, curiosity, and perhaps fear. As the sun set behind the training grounds, stood alone, watching the recruits finish their evening exercises. The whispers of her unknown past, the murmurs of her legendary but invisible missions, and the awe-inspiring calm she carried formed a quiet storm that would soon sweep through Fort Reading. And somewhere in the shadows of the base, Jake understood this truth. The woman he had mocked was not only capable of commanding respect, she demanded it, silently, through observation, skill, and unyielding presence. Fort Reading had seen many leaders, many officers, and many SEALs, but Carter was unlike any of them. And as her shadowed figure disappeared into the mist for the evening, one thought echoed in Jake's mind. We have no idea what she is capable of, and soon we will. The morning sun barely pierced the mist over Fort Reading as Carter strode toward the training grounds. The base was alive with the usual chaos: SEAL trainees sprinting across the obstacle courses, instructors barking commands, and the smell of wet mud and salt lingering in the air. But today, all eyes soon turned to her. Word had spread. The paperwork officer had volunteered to participate in the 24-hour endurance drill, the grueling test of strength, stamina, and strategy that separated the competent from the elite. Lieutenant Jake, leaning against the wall with his team, scoffed audibly. "She's joking, right?" he muttered. "No way she's stepping into that mud, surf, and obstacle nightmare with us." His friends laughed nervously, eager to see the spectacle. They had already learned to respect her words, but physical ability, that remained untested. Indifferent to the snickers began her preparations. She checked her gear with meticulous precision: boots tied, gloves snug, hydration packs secured, and weapons inspected. There was no hesitation in her movements. Every motion was deliberate, a quiet display of experience and readiness. When she approached the starting line, the men stared. They had trained hard, pushed themselves to exhaustion, and yet here was a single officer who seemed poised and calm, as if the drill was nothing more than a morning walk. The horn sounded and the endurance drill began. Mud sucked at boots, waves crashed over trainees, and the biting wind cut through soaked uniforms. Moved with ease. Each leap over barriers, each crawl under barbed wire was precise and efficient. She adjusted her pace carefully, conserving energy while maintaining perfect form. Jake struggled to keep up, chest heaving, muscles screaming in protest. Glanced at him briefly. No mockery, only observation. Hours passed, yet never faltered. When a trainee slipped in the mud, she steadied him without slowing her own pace. When the surf tossed recruits against rocks, she guided them safely to shore, her hands firm and sure. The instructors began whispering among themselves, exchanging glances of disbelief. She moved not as someone trying to prove herself, but as someone entirely in her element. By mid-afternoon, the drill had entered the most grueling stage, the obstacle maze. Walls, nets, ropes, and swinging beams tested both physical strength and strategic thinking. Navigated each obstacle flawlessly, anticipating the optimal path, timing each movement with precision, and offering subtle assistance to those who faltered. The trainees followed her instinctively, as if guided by an invisible hand. Jake's frustration grew. He had always considered himself a capable SEAL officer, strong, fast, tactical. Yet here he was, lagging behind a paperwork officer whose abilities far exceeded his expectations. He struggled through a rope climb, breathless, while scaled it with fluid ease, lowering a line to assist another recruit. For the first time, he felt the humbling weight of genuine expertise. As darkness approached, the drill shifted to a night navigation exercise through dense woodland. Visibility dropped, temperatures fell, and exhaustion began to take its toll. Soldiers stumbled, lost their bearings, and whispered complaints. Moved silently, her eyes scanning shadows, her mind calculating distances, trajectories, and risks. When a misstep threatened to compromise a trainee's path, she was there, steadying, redirecting, guiding. No words wasted, no hesitation. By the late evening, fatigue was palpable. Trainees' muscles quivered, faces streaked with mud and sweat, and morale teetered on the edge of collapse. Remained composed. She didn't slow. She didn't complain. She didn't falter. In every movement, every gesture, she demonstrated the discipline, endurance, and mental fortitude of a warrior who had faced far greater dangers than a training exercise. Jake finally reached the final checkpoint, drenched, shivering, and gasping. Was there, calmly securing the last supplies, ensuring every team member had completed the course. His pride had vanished, replaced by awe. He realized that this woman, who had entered the drill silently, seemingly unremarkable, had dominated every stage, her performance flawless, her composure unshakable. When the drill concluded, the instructors gathered the teams for debriefing. They were silent, unsure how to address what they had just witnessed. Stepped forward. She did not boast. She did not demand attention. She simply gave a crisp salute, her gaze sweeping the room with quiet authority. The trainees, the instructors, and even Jake felt the full weight of her presence. Respect had been earned, not by rank, not by title, but by action, endurance, and unyielding competence. As the men cleaned up, whispers filled the air. "Did you see how she moved through the mud?" one recruit asked. "Like she was born for this." Another shook his head. "I thought she was just a paper pusher. She's on another level." Jake stood quietly, absorbing the reality. His earlier arrogance felt foolish, even shameful. He had underestimated Carter, and in doing so, he had underestimated the very essence of what it meant to lead and endure. Later in the barracks, reviewed notes from the day. Every misstep she had observed, every inefficiency, every potential failure was catalogued meticulously. She was calm, collected, and completely focused. When approached by trainees seeking advice, she spoke only in measured, precise guidance. Never praise, never scolding, only insight. Her methods were subtle but profoundly effective, reshaping the team without overt displays of authority. Jake finally approached her privately. "Commander, I don't even know what to say. He hesitated, searching for words. "You're incredible," regarded him with calm intensity. "Actions speak louder than words, Lieutenant. Observe, adjust, endure. Leadership isn't about recognition, it's about responsibility and execution." Jake nodded, feeling both humbled and inspired. By the time the night fully settled over Fort Reading, one truth was clear. Carter was no ordinary officer. Her performance during the endurance drill had not only proven her physical and tactical superiority, but had begun to shift the culture of respect on the base. Trainees who had doubted her now followed her guidance instinctively. Instructors who had underestimated her recalibrated their perception. And even Jake, once confident and mocking, began to understand the quiet power behind her presence. In the darkness, stood alone for a moment, watching the stars above the training grounds. The exercise was over, but her assessment had only begun. Tomorrow, she would push the base further, testing not just strength and skill, but leadership, teamwork, and mental endurance. Every drill, every mission simulation, every interaction would serve to reveal character and capability. Somewhere deep within Jake's mind, a reluctant admiration had begun to form. He realized that the woman he had mocked was not only capable of matching the best SEALs on the base, she could surpass them. And while he had assumed her rank would dictate respect, it was clear now that her actions and presence demanded it in ways no title could. The endurance drill had been a proving ground. Had not only survived, it was clear she had dominated. And as the men of Fort Reading retired for the night, exhausted, humbled, and inspired, the seed of awe and respect planted by her quiet, unwavering performance began to take root. Carter had arrived as an unknown officer, underestimated and overlooked. By the end of the day, she had begun to transform the base, not through intimidation or hierarchy, but through action, precision, and the quiet, undeniable authority of someone who had already faced and conquered far greater challenges than any training drill could offer. Tomorrow, Fort Reading would see her at her next test, and nobody, not even Jake, could predict just how far she would push them, or how deeply she would redefine their understanding of strength, skill, and leadership. The night was unusually silent over Fort Reading. A cold wind whispered across the training grounds, carrying the faint scent of salt from the nearby coast. Most of the base was asleep, exhausted from the grueling endurance drill, but Lieutenant Jake remained awake, staring at the faint glow of his computer screen. He couldn't shake the image of Carter dominating the drill. Her calm, precise movements, her unwavering authority, and her effortless control over the exercises haunted him. Something about her presence went far beyond experience. It was expertise refined under pressure few could imagine. Driven by a mixture of curiosity, awe, and lingering disbelief, Jake accessed restricted files, navigating through layers of encrypted military records. His public record was sparse, unremarkable enough for someone of her rank. But when he dug deeper, he found references labeled Operation Valkyrie, redacted mission reports, and encrypted communications. The fragments he could access hinted at missions that were extraordinary, unrecorded in public logs, and far beyond anything most SEALs ever faced. His pulse quickened as he read. Her name appeared as team leader for several covert operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. Hostage rescues, tactical extractions, deep reconnaissance missions. Each file hinted at brilliance, courage, and unyielding discipline. Yet her accolades were classified. No medals, no public recognition, no press coverage. She had operated in shadows, invisible to the world she had saved countless times. Jake's mind raced. She's been there, she's done it. And I mocked her. Guilt prickled his chest, but it was overwhelmed by a grudging admiration. The woman who had entered Fort Reading quietly, who had dominated the endurance drill without a word, had lived a life that far surpassed anything he had imagined. She had faced life-and-death situations, orchestrated complex operations, and commanded elite teams, all without recognition. Unable to sleep, Jake replayed memories from the endurance drill, each moment now reframed with new understanding. Hadn't just moved through obstacles with skill, she had anticipated every misstep, every challenge, and every failure. She had guided her team instinctively, saving recruits from mistakes before they occurred. Her calm authority wasn't learned at Fort Reading. It had been forged in the crucible of real combat, in situations where hesitation could mean death. He remembered her gaze during the drill, steady and observant. It had been more than evaluation. It had been assessment born of experience, trained to detect weakness and correct it before catastrophe struck. Her silent corrections, her precise movements, her strategic oversight, they were marks of a seasoned leader, a commander who had survived situations he couldn't even imagine. The fragments of classified files hinted at one particular mission, a nighttime extraction in hostile territory where a SEAL team under her command had been ambushed. Enemy forces outnumbered them and communications were lost. Yet under her leadership, every member of her team survived. Casualties were minimized, objectives completed, and the operation remained unknown to the public. Carter, the paperwork officer, had saved lives while remaining invisible, her heroism unrecorded in official history. Jake felt a mixture of awe and shame. He had approached her with arrogance, believing her rank dictated her competence. Now, he realized he had been blind to the truth. Rank was irrelevant when compared to skill, courage, and experience earned in the field. Carter carried all of these in abundance, quietly, without display. The following morning, whispers spread across the base like wildfire. Trainees spoke in hushed tones about rumored past. Some shared what they had overheard, fragments of stories about covert missions, elite operations, and leadership under fire. Others dismissed the rumors, unwilling to believe that someone so quiet and unassuming could possess such extraordinary abilities. But even skepticism was tinged with respect, and a subtle shift had begun on the base. Oblivious to the growing chatter, continued her work. She observed exercises, evaluated drills, and recorded her assessments meticulously. Her attention to detail was uncanny, noting errors others missed and correcting inefficiencies with subtle gestures. She spoke only when necessary, her guidance precise, measured, and unambiguous. She never boasted, never sought recognition. Her authority came from action, not words. Jake, unable to contain his curiosity, approached her after the morning briefing. "Commander, I need to ask," he stammered. "Your record, there's a lot of secrecy. Were you really involved in everything they're saying?" His voice trembled slightly, betraying both nervousness and awe. Regarded him with calm intensity. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, met his without hesitation. "Lieutenant, respect is earned, not assumed. Actions define leadership. You will learn more about what I've done when it becomes relevant. For now, focus on your team, your skills, and your decisions. That is what matters." Her words, simple yet profound, left Jake speechless. He realized that past, while extraordinary, was irrelevant to her effectiveness as a leader. What mattered was how she operated in the present, assessing, guiding, and correcting without hesitation. Her experience was invisible but palpable, shaping her every movement, decision, and command. The endurance drill had been only a glimpse of her capabilities. Now, her mysterious past loomed larger in Jake's mind. He began to understand why the rumors persisted, why whispers followed her in the halls, and why every action she took carried an unspoken weight. Carter was not merely an officer sent to observe. She was a living embodiment of the SEAL ethos, tested in the most extreme conditions imaginable. Throughout the day, continued her meticulous evaluation. She assessed teamwork, leadership, tactical execution, and problem-solving under pressure. Every mistake, hesitation, and miscalculation was noted and addressed, but always with a quiet efficiency that commanded respect. Soldiers who had once mocked her now followed her advice instinctively, recognizing her authority not through rank, but through demonstrated skill and insight. By late afternoon, Jake found himself in a quiet corner of the base, replaying what he had learned about her. Every rumor, every classified fragment, every story of unseen heroism painted a picture of a commander who had survived impossible missions, led under fire, and earned the respect of those who knew her best. The arrogance and mockery of yesterday felt foolish and naive. Carter was a legend in her own right, a ghost of covert operations whose presence demanded acknowledgement, whether others were ready to admit it or not. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the fog returned, stood alone on the training grounds, observing the recruits completing their exercises. Her silhouette, calm and unyielding, cast a long shadow over the mud and surf. The base had begun to shift subtly around her presence. Respect, once optional, had become necessary. All once hidden in whispers began to surface openly. And for Jake, the lesson was personal. He had underestimated her, and he would never do so again. His past remained largely hidden, even to the men around her. But the proof of her experience was undeniable, in her actions, in her decisions, and in the quiet authority she wielded without a word. The endurance drill had been a start. Today, whispers of her legendary missions only amplified her presence. She was a commander of unmatched skill, operating in silence, and the men of Fort Reading were beginning to understand that respect was no longer optional. It was earned, quietly but undeniably, by Carter. As night fell completely, Jake sat alone in the barracks, staring at the ceiling. The name Carter had taken on a weight he hadn't expected. He realized that leadership, true leadership, was not about rank, medals, or recognition. It was about presence, skill, and courage under pressure. And Carter had all of it in abundance. For the first time in his career, Jake felt both humbled and inspired. He had glimpsed the quiet power of a SEAL who had operated in shadows, whose heroism had gone unseen, and whose presence was now reshaping the very culture of Fort Reading. He understood, finally, why she had been sent here, and why the base would never be the same again. Tomorrow, the challenges would continue, and Carter would push the men further. But now, armed with the knowledge of her past and the proof of her skill, Jake, and the rest of the base, could no longer approach her lightly. The woman they had once dismissed as a paperwork officer had become something far more formidable, a living legend, operating quietly, but commanding respect with every action. And somewhere deep inside, Jake knew that he had only begun to understand the weight of her presence, and the extraordinary story that was unfolding at Fort Reading under the watchful eye of Commander Carter. It began as a routine afternoon at Fort Reading. The sun hung high over the base, reflecting off the wet concrete and casting sharp shadows across the training grounds. Trainees were completing a live fire simulation, a carefully controlled exercise designed to teach decision-making under stress. The instructors watched, nodding performance and adherence to protocol. Everything seemed under control until the unexpected happened. A loud explosion shattered the calm. Smoke billowed from the ammunition hangar at the far end of the base. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and chaos erupted. Trainees scattered, some frozen in shock, others sprinting instinctively toward safety. The instructors barked orders, but communications failed. Panic spread like wildfire, and the normally disciplined base teetered on the edge of disorder. Carter was already moving. Calm, deliberate, and decisive, she assessed the situation in an instant. Her eyes scanned the hangar, noting the trapped personnel and the potential spread of fire. Her voice rang out, cutting through the noise. "Secure perimeters. Evacuate non-essential personnel. Jake, lead Team Bravo to secondary exit and maintain communication relay. I'll enter the hangar." Jake froze. He had never heard her speak with such urgency, and yet the authority in her voice left no room for argument. Commands snapped into motion. Teams responded instantly, following her orders with precision. Even the most panicked trainees adjusted to her presence, their fear tempered by the certainty of her leadership. Inside the hangar, thick smoke swirled, flames licking the edges of ammunition crates. 2 recruits were pinned near the rear exit, coughing and disoriented, moved without hesitation, assessing the risks. She instructed one trainee to secure the unstable crates while another supported the trapped recruits. Every movement was precise, every word calculated. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. Jake watched from the outside, heart pounding. He realized the truth he had only glimpsed in fragments. Carter was more than legendary in rumor. She was capable of commanding life-and-death situations with perfect composure. He followed her orders instinctively, guiding his team through the chaos. Inside the hangar reached the recruits. The fire was closer now, heat scorching the walls, smoke filling the air. One of the recruits panicked, stumbling backward, grabbed his arm, steadying him with unflinching calm. "Focus on my voice. Follow my lead," she said. Her tone was firm yet soothing, a paradox of authority and reassurance. She guided them past the crates, past the flames, and toward safety, every step measured and deliberate. Suddenly, a live charge, part of the exercise, became unstable. A spark ignited dangerously close. The recruits froze, assessed the device quickly. She signaled Jake's team outside to cover the exit and approach the charge. With steady hands and precise movements, she disarmed it, neutralizing the threat in seconds. Sweat ran down her brow, but her expression remained composed, unreadable. By the time the smoke cleared, every recruit was safe, and the potential disaster had been averted. Trainees and instructors alike stared in awe. Jake, chest heaving, struggled to find words. I can't believe she did all that," he stammered. Others echoed his astonishment, whispering to one another, eyes wide with disbelief. The base commander arrived shortly after, surveying the scene. He nodded in approval, acknowledging her calm and decisive handling of the crisis. The instructors, who had once doubted her capability, were now visibly humbled. Even the trainees who had mocked her now looked at her with a mixture of reverence and awe. Carter had not only survived the chaos, she had commanded it, guided it, and controlled it with unerring precision. Later in the mess hall, the atmosphere was transformed. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones about her actions. "Did you see how she handled that?" one trainee whispered. "She didn't hesitate, she just led." Another nodded, voice tight with respect. "I thought I knew what a SEAL looked like. I was wrong. She's in a league of her own." Jake found himself alone with her later, standing near the training grounds as the sun began to dip behind the horizon. "Ma'am, I don't know how to say this, but I've never seen anyone handle that situation like that," he said, voice a mixture of awe and embarrassment. Regarded him with calm, unwavering eyes. "Lieutenant, leadership is not about bravado or rank. It is about responsibility, clarity, and decisive action under pressure. Respect is earned through action, not assumed. Today you saw the difference between a title and true command." Jake nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of her words. For the first time, he realized that all the lessons he had learned as a SEAL, discipline, courage, teamwork, were mere foundations. The kind of leadership displayed was beyond the textbooks, beyond protocols, beyond titles. It was forged in the crucible of experience, in situations where hesitation could mean death, and action meant survival. That evening, as the base settled into an uneasy quiet, reviewed the day's events. She made notes, cataloging responses, identifying weaknesses, and planning corrective strategies. Her focus was absolute, undistracted by recognition or praise. The respect she commanded was implicit, earned silently through action, skill, and unwavering composure. Jake, meanwhile, reflected on the events of the day. The woman he had once mocked, dismissed, and underestimated had demonstrated qualities he had only heard about in legends: courage, precision, composure under fire, and the ability to inspire others without a word. He felt humbled, aware of his previous arrogance, and inspired by the depth of her experience. By nightfall, the base had shifted. The fear and uncertainty that had initially gripped the trainees were replaced by admiration and renewed focus. Instructors spoke quietly of the importance of leadership in extreme situations, using actions as the ultimate example. Rumors of her past, once whispers, were now acknowledged as credible by those who had witnessed her skill firsthand. For Carter, the crisis was a test, not only of the base but of the men under her observation. She had seen their weaknesses, their hesitation, and their strengths. More importantly, she had shown them what true leadership looked like: calm, decisive, and unwavering, even when everything else fell apart. Jake understood now, more clearly than ever, that respect was not given lightly. Carter had earned it, not through words, not through rank, but through action, courage, and the unshakable authority that comes from experience. He felt a quiet determination to rise to her standard, to learn from her example, and to never underestimate the power of calm, precise leadership. The base slept that night, but the lessons of the day lingered in every mind. The endurance drill had been a test of physical skill. Today had been a test of heart, courage, and leadership. Carter had passed with distinction, transforming the base in the process. And somewhere in the shadows, Jake realized that his understanding of leadership and of herself was only beginning. The events of that day would ripple through Fort Reading for weeks. Soldiers would recall her precision under pressure, her ability to inspire without words, and the calm certainty that had saved lives. Carter had proven that leadership was not about ego or recognition. It was about responsibility, action, and unwavering composure when everything else fell apart. As she stood alone near the edge of the training grounds, watching the stars emerge above the base, Carter knew that the test had only begun. The men of Fort Reading had witnessed her skill and authority firsthand, but the true measure of respect would be tested again, and she was prepared to push them further in every way. Jake, lying awake in his bunk that night, replayed every moment. He thought about his arrogance, the jokes, and the underestimation. He thought about the calm precision of Carter, her ability to lead without hesitation, and her command over life-and-death situations. He realized that the woman who had entered Fort Reading quietly, almost invisibly, was now the benchmark against which all others would be measured. And deep inside, he felt a mixture of awe, humility, and anticipation. The story of Carter, the paperwork officer who had revealed herself as a living legend, was only unfolding, and he was witnessing it from the front lines. The morning air at Fort Reading carried a tense quiet. The events of the previous day, the explosion, the rapid response, and Carter's flawless leadership, had spread throughout the base like wildfire. Trainees whispered in the hallways, instructors exchanged knowing glances, and even the base commander appeared unusually serious. The sense of anticipation was palpable. Everyone knew something monumental was about to happen. Lieutenant Jake paced nervously near the training grounds. His respect for her had grown immeasurably over the past days, but he remained uneasy. He had seen her skill, her courage, and her composure under pressure, yet the rumors of her past, fragmentary and heavily redacted, still left him wondering what secrets she carried. He wasn't alone in his curiosity. Trainees and officers alike had speculated in hushed tones about her legendary exploits. By mid-morning, the base commander, Admiral, convened a formal briefing. Officers, instructors, and senior trainees were called to the main hall. A hush fell over the room as he stepped to the podium. His expression was grave, yet proud. "Attention, everyone," Admiral began, his voice steady and commanding. "Over the past week, we've witnessed a remarkable display of leadership, skill, and professionalism. Commander Carter has demonstrated capabilities that few can match, and today it is time to acknowledge the truth of her service." The room shifted uncomfortably. Conversation ceased. Eyes turned toward who stood silently at the side, her posture calm, her expression unreadable. For days, she had allowed her actions to speak for themselves. Now, the moment of formal recognition had arrived. Admiral continued. "Commander Carter has served in numerous classified operations, including several under Operation Valkyrie. Her leadership in extraction missions, covert operations, and tactical responses in hostile territories has saved countless lives, both civilian and military. Today, it is my honor to formally recognize her rank, accomplishments, and extraordinary service record." A stunned silence enveloped the hall. Trainees whispered in disbelief. Officers exchanged incredulous glances. Jake felt his stomach tighten as realization hit him like a thunderclap. The woman he had once mocked, the paperwork officer, was a legend, a living embodiment of SEAL prowess and strategic brilliance. Admiral gestured toward. "Commander Carter, would you care to address the personnel?" Stepped forward, her movements deliberate and poised. The room seemed to shrink around her, the tension palpable. Her gaze swept across the faces of the men and women she had trained, observed, and led. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm yet firm. "I have spent my career in service in the shadows, where the work is vital but often unrecognized. My rank, my accolades, and my missions are irrelevant to the work we do here. Leadership is not about recognition. It is about responsibility, action, and the ability to guide others in the face of uncertainty and danger." Her words, measured and authoritative, commanded attention. Trainees and instructors alike felt the weight of her experience, her knowledge, and her quiet but undeniable authority. Jake swallowed hard, heart-pounding. He remembered every moment of the endurance drill, every subtle command during the crisis, and the meticulous way she had corrected mistakes and guided her teams. Everything he had witnessed now made perfect sense. Carter had never needed to boast. She had let her actions define her. Continued, I am here to observe, assess, and strengthen this base. You will all be challenged and mistakes will be made. But every challenge is an opportunity to learn, adapt, and grow. Respect is not given. It is earned through action, integrity, and accountability. The room erupted in applause. Trainees, officers, and instructors rose to their feet, many clapping enthusiastically, others nodding in solemn acknowledgement. Jake joined in, a mixture of pride and humility washing over him. He realized that he, along with everyone else, had been given a rare opportunity to witness leadership, skill, and courage at its form. Admiral stepped forward once more. Effective immediately, Commander Carter's authority is absolute within the operational and training structure of Fort Reading. Her experience, skill, and judgment are unparalleled, and she is to be regarded as the benchmark for leadership and excellence. This base, and its personnel, will learn from her example. The declaration sent a ripple of awe through the room. The murmurs of doubt, the whispers questioning her capabilities, evaporated instantly. Carter was no longer just a mystery officer. She was a recognized legend, a standard-bearer of SEAL excellence. Jake felt a surge of emotion he had never experienced before. Pride, yes, but also a profound sense of humility. He had underestimated her, mocked her, and doubted her abilities. Now he understood that true leadership transcended rank and bravado. It was forged through experience, courage, and unwavering composure under pressure, qualities Carter possessed in abundance. After the formal briefing, conducted a debriefing session with the trainees and officers. Her approach was methodical and precise, focusing on lessons learned, strengths, and areas for improvement. Every comment, every correction, and every recommendation carried the weight of her extensive operational experience. The room was silent, attentive, and deeply engaged. Jake observed her carefully. He noted the subtle authority in her posture, the clarity in her instructions, and the quiet way she commanded respect without intimidation. She was a master of her craft, and he realized that the only way to meet her standard was through diligence, humility, and unrelenting commitment. Later, during a walk along the training grounds, Jake approached her. "Commander, I just want to say I underestimated you," he admitted, voice tinged with both embarrassment and respect. "I didn't know, I didn't understand, but now I see. You're incredible." Regarded him calmly, her gaze steady. "Lieutenant, respect is earned through action, not words. Continue to observe, learn, and apply. Leadership is not about personal recognition. It is about the impact you have on those around you and the outcomes you produce. That is all that matters." Jake nodded, absorbing the lesson. He realized that this was only the beginning. Carter's presence at Fort Reading was not merely about training drills or operational oversight. It was a profound opportunity to witness, learn, and internalize the principles of true leadership. As the day ended, the base carried a new energy. Trainees and officers alike moved with renewed focus and determination. Whispers of legendary past and her formal recognition spread through the ranks, solidifying the respect she had already earned through action. She had transformed Fort Reading, not through intimidation or rhetoric, but through unparalleled skill, composure, and the quiet authority of a true leader. That night, Jake reflected on the week's events. He realized that leadership, courage, and excellence were not determined by titles or rank, but by consistent, decisive action under pressure. Carter had demonstrated these qualities in abundance, and he was determined to rise to the standard she had set. As he drifted off to sleep, one thought lingered in his mind. Fort Reading had never seen a commander like Carter, and it would never be the same again. Her legend was not just in the missions she had completed or the accolades she had earned in secret. It was in the respect, inspiration, and transformation she had brought to the base, quietly but powerfully, one action at a time. The stage was set for the final challenges. Trainees and officers alike would soon face new tests, pushing their limits, and Carter would guide them, not as a distant superior, but as a master of skill, strategy, and leadership, a living example of what it meant to be a Navy SEAL. And Lieutenant Jake, humbled and inspired, knew that he had been given the rarest of opportunities to witness greatness firsthand, to learn from a legend in the making, and to understand that true respect is earned through courage, competence, and unwavering commitment. The sun rose over Fort Reading, casting golden light across the training grounds. The base, still buzzing from the revelation of Commander Carter's legendary past, had taken on a new energy. Trainees moved with renewed focus, instructors whispered strategies in hushed tones, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Everyone knew that the weeks ahead would not be ordinary, they would be transformative. Had spent the previous night planning. Her notes, detailed and precise, outlined a series of training exercises designed not merely to test physical endurance, but to challenge tactical thinking, teamwork, and leadership under extreme pressure. She understood that skill alone was not enough. Mental resilience, adaptability, and cohesion were equally critical for a SEAL team to succeed. Lieutenant Jake stood among the recruits, adrenaline and curiosity coiling tightly in his chest. Today, he would witness the full scope of her expertise, not just in executing missions, but in teaching others to operate at the level she demanded. He had watched her handle drills, survive crises, and earn respect, but this would be different. This would be instruction at the level of legend. Began with a series of tactical simulations. She split the trainees into small units, assigning roles with deliberate precision. Each team faced scenarios designed to test their decision-making, resourcefulness, and ability to anticipate challenges. One group was tasked with an urban infiltration exercise, another with a hostage extraction simulation, a third with covert surveillance operations. Circulated among them, observing, correcting, and guiding silently. Jake's group faced a simulated nighttime ambush in a densely wooded area. The trainees stumbled initially and, failing to secure key positions, moved quietly to their perimeter, her presence subtle but undeniable. Without speaking, she gestured corrections, a slight shift in stance, a hand signal to alert a teammate, an adjustment in approach angle. The recruits responded instinctively, their actions guided by her silent authority. Hours passed, yet never imposed herself verbally beyond essential corrections. Her teaching method was subtle but effective. She allowed the trainees to make mistakes, observe the consequences, and adapt. By the end of the exercise, the once disorganized team moved with precision, efficiency, and cohesion. Their mistakes had become lessons, and guidance had transformed their abilities without overt instruction. Meanwhile, Jake struggled to keep pace. He had thought he understood leadership, strategy, and tactical execution, but his method revealed the gaps in his knowledge. She pushed him, not with criticism, but by creating scenarios where he had to make rapid decisions under stress. Each choice carried weight, consequences, and opportunity for reflection. By the end of the day, Jake's understanding of command had deepened immeasurably. In another drill, introduced extreme environmental challenges. Trainees navigated obstacle courses under simulated adverse weather conditions, contending with mud, water, and dense fog. Communication devices were intermittently disabled, forcing them to rely on instincts, teamwork, and nonverbal coordination. Observed, noting not just physical performance, but leadership qualities and problem-solving under pressure. During one particularly grueling stage, a trainee became disoriented in the fog, panic overtaking composure. Moved swiftly, guiding him to safety without disturbing the exercise's flow. Her actions demonstrated that leadership was not about completing the drill herself. It was about ensuring the team's success, even if it meant subtle intervention. Jake watched, awestruck, realizing that every lesson she imparted was layered with strategy, discipline, and foresight. As the day progressed, shifted the focus to advanced combat simulations. Trainees had to plan and execute mock operations, incorporating intelligence gathering, tactical maneuvers, and rapid response under simulated fire. She challenged them to anticipate enemy actions, adapt to unexpected variables, and make decisions with limited information. Her critiques were precise and unflinching, yet never discouraging. Her goal was to cultivate critical thinking and mental resilience. By late afternoon, exhaustion was evident. Muscles quivered, energy drained, and morale teetered under pressure. Yet the transformation was visible. Teams that had faltered earlier now executed operations with coordination and strategic insight. Trainees who had doubted themselves now displayed confidence, adaptability, and mutual trust. Had not only improved their physical and tactical abilities, she had reshaped their mindset. Jake, finally catching his breath after a particularly intense scenario, approached her. "Commander, I don't think I've ever seen training done like this," he admitted, voice heavy with exhaustion and awe. "You're not just teaching them drills, you're teaching them how to think, how to lead, how to survive." Regarded him calmly, expression unreadable. Leadership, Lieutenant, is not learned through repetition alone. It is cultivated through experience, reflection, and understanding the consequences of every action. A SEAL must think ahead, adapt instantly, and act decisively, even in situations where failure is not an option. Today, I am showing them, and you, how to develop that capability. Her words lingered, their weight profound. Jake realized that everything he had witnessed, the endurance drills, the crisis response, the covert reputation, was now being translated into actionable lessons for the entire base. Carter was not merely demonstrating excellence. She was instilling it in others, reshaping the culture of Fort Reading one precise, calculated action at a time. As evening descended, gathered the teams for debriefing. She highlighted successes, dissected failures, and provided clear, actionable guidance for improvement. Her evaluations were incisive yet encouraging, fostering accountability while inspiring confidence. Trainees who had struggled earlier now left with renewed determination, motivated not by fear, but by respect for the standard she. Jake observed quietly, reflecting on the transformation unfolding before him. Training was not about showing superiority. It was about developing potential, pushing limits, and preparing soldiers for the realities of combat and leadership. Every instruction, every correction, every intervention was deliberate, calculated, and designed to instill excellence. By nightfall, the base had a profound shift. Trainees moved with a new sense of purpose. Instructors adjusted their methods to align with precision. Even seasoned officers found themselves reconsidering their approaches to leadership and training. The legend of Carter, once whispered in fragments, now confirmed through action and revelation, had begun to transform Fort Reading from within. Jake, finally resting in his bunk, reflected on the week's events. He had entered the base with confidence, arrogance even, mocking what he perceived as a quiet, unassuming officer. Now he had witnessed her endure, lead, and instruct with a mastery that transcended rank and title. He felt humbled, inspired, and determined to rise to the standard she had set. In the quiet darkness, he understood the magnitude of what Carter had achieved. She had revealed her legendary past, proven her capability under pressure, and begun transforming the base personnel into a cohesive, disciplined, and capable force. The SEALs of Fort Reading were no longer just trainees. They were a team molded by the quiet authority, insight, and strategic brilliance of a living legend. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new exercises, and new opportunities for growth. But the foundation had been laid. Under Carter's guidance, the men and women of Fort Reading would not just learn to survive. They would learn to excel, to lead, and to embody the principles of courage, skill, and unwavering discipline that she every day. And Jake, humbled and inspired, realized that he had been given a rare gift, the opportunity to learn from the best, to witness greatness firsthand, and to understand that true leadership was not about ego or recognition. It was about action, responsibility, and the profound ability to inspire and transform those around you. Fort Reading would never be the same. The legend of Carter was not confined to whispers or classified files. It was alive, present, and actively shaping the future of every soldier under her guidance. The morning at Fort Reading was crisp, the air buzzing with anticipation. Today marked the culmination of weeks of rigorous training, endurance drills, tactical simulations, and high-pressure exercises, all under the watchful eye of Commander Carter. The base personnel knew this was more than just another exercise. It was the ultimate test, a final evaluation that would measure skill, leadership, teamwork, and resilience. Trainees and officers gathered on the training grounds, their eyes drawn immediately to. She stood tall and poised, radiating calm authority, her presence alone commanding attention. The events of the past weeks, the endurance drill, the crisis, and her transformative training, had already reshaped the base. Today, she would cement her influence and leave an indelible mark on every SEAL in attendance. Jake adjusted his gear, muscles tense with anticipation. He glanced at, now fully aware of the legend behind her stoic exterior. Every command she gave in previous exercises, every subtle gesture, every silent correction now carried context and weight he could finally comprehend. She had prepared them all for this moment, not to show off, not to intimidate, but to mold them into a cohesive, disciplined, and strategically minded team. Address the assembled personnel. Today, you will undertake a full-scale mission simulation, she announced. It will test every skill you've learned, physical endurance, tactical execution, decision-making under pressure, and leadership. Failure is not fatal, but success depends on your ability to trust yourselves and each other. Remember, leadership is earned through action, accountability, and clarity of purpose. Her words, calm but unwavering, resonated through the crowd. They were not merely instructions, they were a mantra, a code by which every trainee and officer would measure themselves. The simulation began. Teams were deployed into a sprawling mock urban environment, tasked with locating hostages, neutralizing threats, and securing objectives while contending with unpredictable variables. Smoke, flashing lights, loud noises, and realistic tactical challenges created chaos, testing every skill they had been taught. Jake's team encountered their first obstacle immediately, a heavily barricaded structure with simulated hostiles inside. Hesitation and doubt crept in. Jake hesitated for a split second, a lifetime in a tactical scenario, but then he remembered lessons. Anticipate, adapt, execute decisively. He signaled his team, adjusted their approach, and led them through the obstacle with efficiency and precision. Observed silently from a distance, her gaze sharp and analytical. She intervened only when absolutely necessary, allowing the trainees to make decisions, learn from mistakes, and execute strategies independently. Her guidance was subtle yet profound, a hand here, a gesture there, but always focused on fostering confidence, adaptability, and strategic thinking. Meanwhile, another team struggled with communication breakdowns in the simulated chaos, moved quickly, signaling through hand signs and positioning, restoring order without verbal commands. The trainees adapted instantly, regaining cohesion and continuing the mission. Jake, observing this, felt awe again, not just for her skill, but for her ability to influence and inspire without speaking, commanding respect through presence and decisive action. Hours passed as the simulation intensified. Trainees were tested physically, mentally, and emotionally. Exhaustion mounted, mistakes occurred, and pressure reached its peak. Moved throughout the exercise, observing every move, nodding every decision, correcting where necessary, and letting lessons sink in naturally. Her method was not to dominate, but to empower, to forge capable, resilient operators who could act decisively under stress. The final objective brought all teams together, a coordinated extraction of multiple hostages under simulated hostile fire. The exercise required flawless teamwork, rapid decision-making, and trust among all participants. Jake's heart pounded as he led his team, integrating lessons from training. Anticipate, communicate, trust your teammates, and act decisively. As the teams executed the extraction, chaos erupted in simulated form, explosions, ambushes, and unexpected obstacles. Trainees responded with precision, each action a reflection of teaching. When one team member stumbled, others adjusted instinctively. Mistakes became opportunities to adapt, and every decision reinforced cohesion and confidence. Watched intently, noting the transformation. These were no longer the same trainees who had entered Fort Reading days ago. They moved with purpose, thought strategically, and supported each other instinctively. Her training, mentorship, and example had reshaped them completely. Finally, the exercise concluded. Smoke cleared, lights dimmed, and a profound silence settled over the grounds. Trainees and officers, exhausted but exhilarated, looked toward. She stood calmly, surveying the results of weeks of rigorous training. Her presence alone demanded acknowledgement, not through words but through the sheer weight of competence and leadership. Admiral approached, visibly moved. "Commander Carter, the base owes you more than words can convey. You have not only demonstrated unparalleled skill and leadership, but you have transformed this entire unit into an elite, cohesive force. Your influence will resonate here for years to come." Nodded, her calm composure unchanged. "Leadership is not measured by accolades or recognition, Admiral. It is measured by the ability to develop others, to inspire confidence, and to instill resilience. This base is now capable, confident, and ready for any challenge. That is all that matters." The personnel erupted in applause. This time, it was not polite acknowledgement, it was genuine, heartfelt respect. Trainees and officers alike recognized the extraordinary transformation they had. They had witnessed a living legend in action, learned from her expertise, and experienced her influence firsthand. Jake approached her last, exhausted but profoundly moved. "Commander, I've learned more in these past weeks than I thought possible. You've taught us to lead, to adapt, and to trust ourselves. I can't thank you enough." Regarded him with a steady gaze. "Lieutenant, the credit belongs to you and your peers. My role is to guide, to challenge, and to empower. The growth, the resilience, and the excellence you have achieved are yours. Never forget that leadership is not inherited, it is earned through action, accountability, and unwavering dedication." As the sun set over Fort Reading, the base personnel gathered for a final salute. Carter stood at the center, calm, composed, and resolute. The men and women she had trained, tested, and transformed raised their hands in salute, an acknowledgement of her authority, skill, and legendary presence. For Jake, the moment was overwhelming. He realized that had not only earned their respect, but had set a standard for what true leadership looked like, a standard he would strive to uphold for the rest of his career. The lessons she had imparted, both through action and guidance, were imprinted on every mind present. His legacy at Fort Reading was now secure. She had proven her skills under pressure, revealed her extraordinary past, transformed her trainees into a cohesive, capable force, and earned universal respect. Her presence had reshaped the culture of the base, leaving an indelible mark that would influence every SEAL who served there in the years to come. As the base quieted for the night, Jake reflected on the journey. From the first endurance drill through crisis and revelation to the final transformative exercises, Carter had the essence of a Navy SEAL: courage, skill, composure, and leadership beyond measure. He understood now that respect was not demanded. It was earned through consistent action, accountability, and unwavering dedication. And standing quietly beneath the fading light, knew that her mission at Fort Reading had succeeded. She had not only tested the men and women under her charge, but had shaped them, empowered them, and instilled in them the principles that define true SEAL leadership. The legend of Carter, the paperwork officer who had quietly become a living legend, would live on, not only in the stories whispered in the halls, but in the excellence, courage, and resilience of the SEALs she had mentored. Fort Reading would never be the same. The legacy of Commander Carter was now cemented, not in medals or records, but in the hearts, minds, and actions of every SEAL she had touched. Her story was one of quiet authority, extraordinary skill, and transformational leadership, the epitome of what it meant to serve, to lead, and to inspire. And as night fully embraced the base, a profound truth settled over Fort Reading. Legends are not defined by recognition, but by the impact they leave behind. Carter had earned her place, not only in history, but in the hearts and respect of every soldier she had led.